Hello, this is William Hemphill with the Faith and Family Matters podcast. And I wanted to ask a question today. Are you suffering from election anxiety? Are you suffering from election anxiety? And so I want to just ask some questions. Are you worried that your world will end if your preferred candidate does not win the election? If so, you may be suffering from election anxiety. Do you find yourself reacting whenever someone says something negative about your preferred candidate? You could be suffering from election anxiety. Do you view everything that the opposing candidate says as untrue? It's possible you could be suffering from election anxiety. Are you ending relationships with people that you love based on how they are voting in the election, or if they're voting at all? You could be suffering from election anxiety. Are you, or do you find yourself constantly watching the polls, looking for a little uptick in your candidate's favor? You could be suffering from election anxiety. And finally, are you losing sleep at night or finding yourself getting angry or irritable more often or having panic attacks because of the election? If so, you could be suffering from election anxiety. And so I do want to talk about this for a moment as a pastoral therapist. And I want to just share a couple points quickly. Number one, if you're suffering from election anxiety, it is not entirely your fault. Our news cycles, our media, our emails, our text messages, our mailboxes, everything is filled with election material at this time. You almost can't get away from it. The challenge with it is this: it is designed to instill as much fear as possible inside of us. Now, you may ask, why do candidates often try to appeal to our fears? Well, it's because their marketing people know that fear is a motivating factor. And if I can get you scared enough of the other person, you will vote for me in the hopes that you'd feel safe. As a matter of fact, fear might be one of the greatest motivating factors because we fear the pain that might happen, especially if the other candidate, the one that we're not voting for, wins. So I want to say, first of all, it's not your fault because we're bombarded by this. We also have news media that has biases toward one way or the other. And so all of these things, whether it's the news media, whether it's our social media that's geared towards showing us certain things, whether it's the text messages we constantly receive, whether it's the mail we get in our mailboxes, all of this stuff is hitting us right now, and it can create an environment of anxiety within us. So, first of all, I want you to know, if you're suffering from election anxiety, it's not your fault, totally. Number two, it's not your fault because you could be being gaslighted, or maybe I should say you are being gaslighted. Now, gaslighting is a manipulative tactic designed to cause someone to question their reality, their thoughts, their emotions, and their memories. Gaslighting causes us to question ourselves and our experience because someone is invalidating our experience intentionally. And so gaslighting can often show up in the following ways. Someone can pretend not to understand something when they actually do. You tell someone 2 plus 2 is 4, and they say, well, no, it isn't. They probably understand that 2 plus 2 equals 4, but they're saying that they don't understand it. Two, they are labeling your thoughts or emotions as crazy or imagined. You actually see someone do something. You experience someone doing something. But when you talk to this person, they are looking at you and saying, that didn't happen. That's your imagination, or something must be wrong with you because it's not experienced that way. They are trying to make you question what you actually saw and what you actually experienced. Number three, they're questioning your memory of the event. That didn't happen. You must be wrong. Number four, they're pretending to forget about what actually occurred. In other words, the event that you experienced or that you saw or the action that you experienced from them that you know happened and that you know harmed you, they're pretending like it didn't happen. That didn't occur. That's not true. They're gaslighting you. They're trivializing your own experiences and emotions. In other words, they're saying your experiences and emotions do not matter, and they are denying the events that have actually occurred. So, in other words, if you're experiencing this within the election cycle, you are being gaslighted, and gaslighting is a harmful thing because it makes us question ourselves. It makes us feel like that we're, for lack of a better term, going crazy inside. It makes us question ourselves and doubt ourselves and maybe saying something is wrong with us. Where the truth is, many times you've got it nailed right. It's just that that person is not going to acknowledge what has happened. And I think that's important because when you're dealing with gaslighting, you have to be ready to realize that who you're talking to is not going to be willing to acknowledge the truth. And so you take other measures to protect your self-esteem and whatever you must do when somebody else will not acknowledge the truth. Number three, you might be experiencing election anxiety if you're trying to control others. Here's what I mean by that. It is okay to talk to your loved ones and try to convince them of the importance of voting. Say, hey, I really would like it. Children, sons, parents, siblings, cousins, family, friends, if you go out and vote. You can even talk to them about your preference for candidates and why you like your candidate. But when you're trying to coerce or force somebody to go and vote, that's when you're acting more out of your own anxiety than out of your concern for them. One of the reasons that gives you anxiety is because God gives human beings a free will, and with free will, we can make our own choices. And one of the most challenging things to do is to try to convince somebody to go against their free will. All that does will give you anxiety as they actively resist you or passively resist you. Passive resistance might be, hey, son, did you go vote today? Hey, son, did you go vote today? Yeah, I'm going to vote tomorrow. And they have no intention of voting, so they just don't answer your call. That's passive resistance. You're causing yourself anxiety when you're trying to control others. So, as we wrap this up briefly, I want to talk about some ways to reduce election anxiety. Some ways to reduce election anxiety. Number one, go and vote for the candidate of your choice. We're still in the early voting season that ends, I know, in the state of Georgia on Friday, and then Tuesday is election day. So go and vote for the candidate of your choice. That way you will have done your civic duty. Number two, get involved politically if you choose. If you really support a candidate and want to get involved, you can contribute funds, you can be active in the campaign. There's still time to do different things. So get involved politically if you choose. Number three, way to induce election anxiety, and I've used this myself, take a media break, especially now because it's all over the place. You know, you can't look at your social media. You can't look at YouTube. You can't look at Facebook. You can't look at Instagram. You can't look at TikTok. You can't look at anything without seeing something roll through. And then if you go watch something on the news, every commercial is going to be bombarded with a candidate or something like that, especially if you are in a swing state or a place where there's a close election. So it's very possible you might have to take a media break just to reduce your exposure to that and reduce some anxiety. Number four, support and understand the truth. Recognizing that your emotions, your experiences, and your thoughts are valuable, and ignore the gaslighting. Here's what I mean. If you've lived for a while, you've experienced a few things. You've probably made some good judgments. You probably made some bad judgments. But you've made some observations about life. As you do that, sit back and reflect on what may be truthful, but then ignore the gaslighting when someone's trying to convince you that you didn't see what you actually saw or that you didn't experience what you actually experienced. So ignore gaslighting. Number five, encourage others to vote. You can do that. Just don't try to control them. We already talked about that. Allow your loved ones to make their choices and respect them in their choices. Not one, two, three, four, five. Number six, I believe this is pray and do good self-care. Pray, that's spiritual self-care, and do good self-care. Get some sleep at night. Exercise, eat good food, socialize with friends, do things that help build you up as a person. If you're struggling with anxiety, see a mental health therapist to try to have some work to deal with the anxiety to help you regulate your emotions. In other words, do good self-care, and that's a good practice to do, not just in election season, but all the way through. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. That is one of the, that's point seven. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. So I tell people, hey, it's important to love God, but when I talk about loving your neighbor as yourself, I think about the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Think about John Wesley's rules. One of his simple rules is to do no harm to others. In other words, treat people with respect, especially those who may be different from you, especially those who might vote differently from you. Treat them with respect and kindness and dignity because they are people made in the image of God. And then the final point, I think this is number eight, be grateful for what you have and live a life of service. Be thankful for the blessings that you do have and use your gifts, talents, and abilities to help serve others. Hopefully, these suggestions will help reduce your election anxiety or anxiety in general. This is William Hemphill, thanking you for joining me today on the Faith and Family Matters podcast. If you would like to know more about mental health and dealing with anxiety, please go to my site at www.faithandfamilyempowerment.com. Take care and have a wonderful day.